here. Today we're going to start on the next part of the series that are supporting the work with the conversations and also the coherence device. And what we're going to, in this next short part of the series, we're going to look at the actual 5 physical brains. And this is incredibly important work and incredibly, really supportive to the whole understanding of what we're talking about. So we're going to begin with the, I'll preface this by saying that the common view of these things in consciousness work is that the old evolutionary view of things is completely redundant. So, like, it's the modern view of these things is the way that we actually look at evolution is completely redundant. And of course, this actually supports the view of the major religions and general sort of theological thought anyway. All that kind of philosophy that's associated with it is that the whole idea that matter itself can actually strive all the way up to God, in a complete, in that being the only answer to the situation, is considered to be an extremely corrupt sort of form of thought, and yet it's still maintained as the basis of biological science as we know it. So anyway, the what I'm going to talk about here is the reasonably high level. If we were to look at it from an evolutionary perspective, we would be looking at a pretty high level of evolution, which is the human body. We're going to start off looking at these 5 brains. If we were to consider it from an evolutionary process, the first brain we're going to look at would be right at the beginning of that cycle. Clearly I have nothing against either train of thought, so I'm equally comfortable with an evolutionary view of things. I'm equally comfortable with a creative or a creationary view of things as well. So, like, I'm happy to utilize either of these schools of thought, because really all I'm interested in is what works, what's actually successful from a perspective of self-development as well as a perspective of healing. So if we were to look at the bottom end of the evolutionary thing, we'd look for what was actually at a brain level. What would be the so-called lowest scale of beings on the planet that would actually inhabit these different levels of the different brains that we see in the human body. So we begin with the instinctive center, or the instinctive brain. Now, I can actually see an instinctive brain operating at the level of a microbe. And we're talking about a single cell microbe here, so we can't talk about a brain because we've only got one cell, so we can't talk about a collection of cells all coordinating in some way to actually behave like a brain. And yet the instinctive brain, or the actual, what we would think about in a human as being the gut brain, is clearly present in a microbe. So what does if we come to something a bit more complex, we could look at, say for example, an arthropod, so an insect or something of that nature. And clearly an arthropod has an instinctive brain operating within it. So it's managing all of the complex functions within the body of the insect. Curiously enough, an insect actually has the next brain as well. It has a sex center as well. You see it clearly in terms of communal insects like ants or termites or bees or so on. But anyway, we get back to what actually is in an instinctive brain. Well, it's the brain that actually is going to manage all of the complexity of the physiology of the body. So if we're thinking in terms of the work that we're doing with Candida, is so much tied into the immune system of the body, in terms of how we're interacting with the Candida. And this is all instinctive. This is absolutely all of the instinctive or gut brain type of actions that are going on. So in a human, obviously, we do have this focus on the upper part of the abdomen. So the sex centre is much more involved in the lower part of the abdomen. But the upper abdomen, so all of those complex organs, the stomach, intestines, sort of large and small intestines, the liver, other organs like the pancreas, we don't normally think about them as being specific organs, but in terms of the way that we're looking at it, they're definitely a part of the picture. Kidneys, spleen, so on. So, like, there's a lot of complicated structures that are involved, physiological structures that are involved, and or anatomical structures that are involved in the actual expression of what the instinctive centre is going about. So the actual gut brain, or the abdominal brain, is composed of all of these things, all of these parts, and depending on if you've come from a Chinese medicine background or indeed an Ayurvedic, so more from the Indian subcontinent, that line of thinking, then you would be looking at these functionings in a slightly different way, but it all actually comes back to a gut brain or instinctive mind approach that's actually being made. So when we're actually working with these things, when we're working with it with the coherence device in particular, what we are doing is we're actually working to get all of the neurological and interestingly all of the hormonal, so the endocrine activity of this region of the body into a reasonably coherent state. That's certainly the intention of it, and the activities in therapy are to actually absolutely go for that process. So look, that's the gut brain, and as I say, you could go all the way back to an insect in terms of an evolutionary model. If we were going to look at it from that perspective, you could look at it from the perspective of the simplicity of an insect as actually having a physical gut brain. They have neurological structures which are pretty much, other than the sex centre stuff, is all there is going on. Like, there's no intellect going on, there's no emotions going on, and the moving centre stuff that's going on there is much more instinctive based. So we're looking at that model. It's that level of simplicity of an organism that we're looking at. And as I say, if you were to bring that brain level all the way down to a microbe, then a single fungus or a single bacteria definitely has the expression of an instinctive brain or a gut brain about it, without actually having a gut as such in what they're doing. So look, that's the the basis of what I have to say about the gut brain, and we'll go on next to have a look at the pelvic brain in a human, and we'll look to how that would operate in a less complex organism than a human, or than a mammal even. So we'll do that next, and look, thanks for watching, and like and share. Thanks, bye.